Hello, I am Kristen. Welcome to my channel. Today, I wanted to talk about the benefit of the Minerva global rotation since I just uploaded a video really trashing it. So I today want to focus on what I feel I really learned from living in Buenos Aires, even though I also felt like I wasn't doing enough in Buenos Aires. I still did learn a lot just from being there, just from living there, just from being in that environment and having to interact with the people, even if it was on a more superficial or short-term type of level. So I might also make this into more of a series and go back and talk about the other cities, but today I wanted to start with the one that's pretty fresh in my mind, which is Buenos Aires. I have my handy dandy notebook with my 5 things. So first, the really big one that I think is going to stay with me the most is I learned and I got a new perspective on what inflation really is, because there is a lot of inflation happening in Argentina. There has been for a while, and I really saw this and experienced it myself, even though it didn't affect me nearly as much as it affects the people that live and make money in Argentina in particular. But I did see the exchange rate change quite significantly. When I first landed, I exchanged my dollars to pesos, to Argentine pesos, and it was about $1 to about 35 or 36 Argentine pesos. Now, by the time I left, that exchange rate had gone up to about $1 to 45 Argentine pesos. And with that, I saw the prices of like all the places that I bought food, all the things that I frequently was getting actually go up during the semester. In some cases more than once. Different stores adjust differently. They raise their prices at different points. They have different reasons to decide to raise prices, but eventually with that kind of jump, everything had the price increase. Now for me, since I was withdrawing money every so often, I would withdraw about $50 worth of cash at a time. So by the time that ran out, if the inflation rate had changed, my money hadn't really lost that much value. It wasn't that big of a deal because in terms of US dollars, I was still spending a very similar amount. But you can imagine that I imagined that if I was also making money in that Argentine peso currency, if my salary wasn't increasing at the same rate as prices were increasing, it would be so hard to continue living the way that I had been living. It'd be hard to continue affording the same foods. And that was something I hadn't really understood before. I'd heard people talk about inflation. I kind of knew what it was, from an economic definition standpoint, but really understanding what that means for the people of a country in their day-to-day life is a really big perspective that I gained through living in Argentina. Even though it didn't affect me nearly as much, I could see with my eyes in a very tangible way how it was affecting the people around me. So, number 2, to go to something a bit lighter, is I really, in Argentina more than any other city, thought about physical affection, particularly platonic physical affection and public physical affection, because Argentina, as you may know, everybody greets each other with a kiss to the cheek, like a little hug. You don't really kiss the cheek, you just kiss next to the cheek. But literally everyone, when they enter a group or just meet up with someone, but particularly in groups, I think it's interesting, you have to do that to everybody in the group. When I would be at bars or even at restaurants, anywhere, when I was at the airport, you would see someone you knew join a group and go around and do the hug and to every single person. And that was really interesting to me because I felt when I did that with my boss or anybody that was an actual Argentinian person, it feels very warm. It makes you feel very welcomed in a way that I think the way that we greet each other in the US or in other countries doesn't. And so it was very interesting for me to see that you can have like that level of physical closeness with somebody and have it still be very platonic, but have it also be like very beneficial potentially to the relationship, because you're just like showing more love and more like openness. And it's just, I thought it was really nice and made me think about how, if I like that so much, how could I potentially be like showing more physical affection or having more physical affection with my friends in a way that would be like appreciated to me. So that was a very cool thing that living in Argentina made me open my mind to. The third thing I have down is the idea of assembly and like protest and like strikes was very different in Argentina, I think, than it was in the US, and it made me really think about what a protest is, what a protest can accomplish, and how the people in the protest really matter, and how it's not just like a mass of people, but the way those people feel, the way those people are expressing themselves, and the expectations of those people do make a difference. Because I think the protests and marches and demonstrations in Argentina feel a lot more emotional, but emotional in a very like constructive way. It's hard to describe, but I participated in the Remembrance Day marches, which is on March 24th, to say never again in terms of what happened with the last dictator. And that one's probably a little different, but I did also see a massive strike happening when I was going to the airport to leave Argentina. And I think the level of participation is what really stood out to me, because that's just like not something that happens in the US anymore. I think it's like marches in the US are for the people who are already really involved in that thing and already really care about that thing, whereas in Argentina it felt like marches and demonstrations oftentimes were for everybody. And I guess the attitude towards that kind of participation and the expectations that that participation would make a difference were a lot stronger in Argentina than I feel myself or I hear from other people in the United States especially. So it was just interesting to see that democracy, mainly democracy, can look similar but also feel different in different countries. I don't really have as concrete of a takeaway on that one. It was just like very interesting to like feel like something was different but also feel like things were very similar, and like trying to navigate that and really asking questions about why that would be was really interesting for me. Number 4 is something I've kind of noticed, but something that really stood out to me in Argentina. It's a quicker note, and that's that public transit works very different in different places, and in Buenos Aires in particular. It almost felt like there was an expectation that everybody taking public transit knew the city very well, had lived in the city for a long time, and all of that, because this funny thing happens where the buses don't like announce the stops at all. So you basically have to just know when to get off. And that was just very strange to me, very confusing to me, but also made me consider that like Buenos Aires is really like a home for people, and it's not like a place that many people are just like passing through or living in temporarily, which was like somewhat different than a lot of the other cities that I've been in. Interesting. Very interesting. So the 5th and final thing is a little bit of a downer again, and I got a new perspective on both poverty and the perceptions of like homelessness. In particular, like the idea of people asking for money, or like, I don't know what the word is, but like being on the street asking for money or things like that. In the US, we tend to see homeless people very negatively, which I really already didn't like. But in Argentina, I think it was definitely felt that the people who seemed homeless or anything like that were more like victims. They were like definitely in poverty and just stuck there, which I think is something that people recognize because the state of the country and the economy of the country doesn't really enable people to get out of a state of poverty. So even if not everyone was willing to like give them money, there was never the sort of like rude attitude I often perceive in the US towards homeless people. And also the different ways people like tried to get money was really interesting to me, because it's not really something that I'd seen in the US. For example, people would actually come into a cafe. Like, there was a Starbucks I went to that was in a very like busy area where this would happen a lot. Like a little kid that was obviously quite poor, lived who knows where, not in a proper house most likely, would come around and ask for money to the individual people in the cafe. And another similar thing that happens both in cafes and like on the subway in particular is that people will go around to everyone trying to sell something like socks, or even like little like cards or different things that they can manage to like scrap up for themselves basically. And they would like leave it with each person and then come back around and ask for money for you to keep it. So that was very different, but also I think continues to demonstrate that it's not really viewed as laziness if you are homeless or very poor in the way that it is in the US. And I just felt like that was different. And I think there's a lot of different reasons that it was different, but it was just very new to me and a different perspective on that whole experience that people have, and in terms of like how they can try to deal with that in these different places in a way that is somewhat socially acceptable. It's very interesting. The final thing I want to say is that Argentina is not very good at seasoning their food, which is quite a shame, and it's probably one of the places where I heard Minervans complaining about the food the most. So that was also interesting, but also, not as interesting. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions about anything that I tried to explain, definitely drop them below. If you want to hear about the perspectives I've gained in the other cities, also let me know, but I probably am going to do it anyways, but it might come faster if people are actually interested. I actually did film this video right now because I replied to a comment and I realized that I had a lot more to say about it, so I wanted to make a video, and here it is. So if you want to hear more about Minerva or just watch me live my wild life, I would appreciate if you subscribed and give this a like or whatever. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye!